I lied to my husband while he was in Afghanistan. Not just little fibs, I'm talking about the kind of deception that makes people call you soulless. The internet thinks I'm just another dependapotamus who couldn't keep her legs closed while her man was downrange. They don't know the half of it. They want me to be the villain because it's easier that way. But the truth is, I was trying to save his life while he was busy saving everyone else's. I've lost my marriage, my home, and every friend I ever made on base. The scariest part is that if I had to do it again, I might make the same choice. So here's the whole ugly story, including the part about the 47000 and the forged power of attorney. By the end, you'll probably hate me too. At least you'll know why I did it. My father died in uniform before I learned to drive, so I knew the cost of service better than most wives. When Jake deployed with the 101st, I didn't cry at the send-off. I stood there in my sundress, spine straight, waving like I'd been taught. My vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was this terrible, specific knowledge of what could happen over there. I knew which notifications meant death and which meant injury. I knew the difference between a ramp ceremony and a dignified transfer. That knowledge made me capable in a crisis, but paranoid as hell. Jake's unit was supposed to be in Coast Province for 9 months, doing advisory work. We were 3 years married, no kids yet, living in Fort Campbell housing. His mother called me the week after he left, her voice tight with panic. His younger brother had wrapped his truck around a tree in Kentucky, DUI, needed bail money and a lawyer. The family didn't have it. Jake's sergeant's salary barely covered their existing bills. Don't you dare tell him, his mother begged. His head needs to be in the fight, not worrying about us. That's when I made the first decision that seemed small. I'd just look into a loan. Not actually take one, just see what our options were. The problem was, my credit looked like a war zone because I'd let Jake handle the finances and he'd forgotten to pay a few cards. His name was on everything important. Mine was just on the Target card and the cable bill. I went to the lender just off post, the one with the neon sign that promised fast cash for military families. The guy behind the desk, Mr. Davies, had a fade haircut and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I told him I needed to think about it. He gave me his card and said to call any time. That night, I looked at Jake's picture on our dresser, dusty from the fan, and I thought, what's one little secret if it keeps his family afloat? The next day, I walked back in and signed for a $5,000 loan against Jake's upcoming paycheck. Mr. Davies asked for Jake's power of attorney. I handed over the one we'd notarized before deployment, which gave me broad financial authority. I rationalized it as protecting Jake. Why distract him with money problems when I could just handle it? The payment schedule was $600 a month, which seemed manageable with his combat pay. By week 3, Tyler's legal fees had ballooned to $8,500. The lawyer wanted more or he'd walk. I did the math. If I took out a second, larger loan, I could pay off the first and cover the new costs. Mr. Davies approved me for $12,000 this time, no questions asked. He even offered to handle the electronic signatures for me. Military wives need support, not red tape, he said, and I believed him because I needed to. His wife, Mrs. Davies, ran the front desk. She started bringing me coffee on my visits, calling me honey, asking about Jake. One afternoon she mentioned her nephew was in the same province. You must be so proud, she said, and I felt that familiar twist in my gut, but also scared. I nodded, unable to speak. She touched my hand and said, we take care of our own. That's when I started lying to Jake's friends. When Sergeant Morales's wife called to invite me to FRG meetings, I made excuses, said I was swamped with work. Reality, I was avoiding their questions about why I seemed stressed. I was a 911 dispatcher, used to holding it together under pressure, but the double life was making me crack. During calls, my hands shook. I snapped at a woman reporting a domestic dispute, and my supervisor wrote me up. The first real consequence hit when Mr. Davies called to say the interest rate on the second loan was adjustable. My payment was now $950 a month, due in 14 days. I stared at our bank account, $1,200 balance, plus I needed groceries and gas. Jake's next deposit wouldn't hit for 3 weeks. That's when the secret became a creature I was feeding, growing larger every day. His best friend Danny's wife, Lisa, stopped by unannounced. She found me on the porch, crying over overdue notices I'd hidden under the seat cushions. What's going on? She demanded. You look like hell and you're dodging everyone. I told her it was just deployment stress, that I was fine. She didn't believe me, but she left. The look in her eyes, pity mixed with suspicion, made me realize I was becoming someone people whispered about. The deeper truth started 6 weeks in. Mr. Davies called me into his office and slid a manila envelope across the desk. Inside was a birth certificate for a child named Mason, born 2 years before Jake and I met. The mother's name was unfamiliar. Your husband has been paying child support through a private agreement, Mr. Davies said softly, but the mother contacted us. She wants it formalized through his command, which could affect his security clearance. My entire body went cold. Jake had a son he'd never mentioned. The payments explained why his checks always seemed smaller than expected. The money I'd been borrowing wasn't for Tyler's DUI, it was to pay off this woman quietly, to keep Jake's secret from becoming an official problem that could end his career. His mother had been using Tyler as cover. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Mr. Davies leaned back. Because you have the power of attorney. You can make this go away for $18,000, cash. She signs a non-disclosure, Jake never knows, and his record stays clean. I should have called Jake. Should have told him everything. Instead, I thought about his deployment, how he'd looked in his gear so focused. A misconduct investigation would destroy him. I signed a third loan, this one for $22,000, forged Jake's electronic signature using a scanned copy of his POA, and handed over the money. The woman, Crystal, signed papers I never read. I told myself I was protecting my marriage. To cover the payments, which now totaled over $200 a month, I did something worse. I created a fake email account in Jake's name and had all the loan documents redirected there. When the lenders sent verification calls, I intercepted them, mimicking his voice as best I could. I became a forger, an identity thief, and a liar, all in the name of love. Then Mrs. Davies found out. She'd noticed the amounts didn't match the usual payday loan patterns. She cornered me in the parking lot, her face hard. You're in over your head, honey. Those loans are illegal. You forged his signature. That's wire fraud. I started crying, and she softened just enough to say, I'll keep quiet, but I need $5,000 for my silence. That's not even the worst thing I did. I sold Jake's 1967 Mustang to pay her off. The one he'd restored with his father, the one he said would be our child's college fund someday. I told myself it was just metal, just memories, while his life was on the line. I posted it online, lied to the buyer about the title status, and pocketed $8,500 cash. The rest went to keep up with the loan payments that were swallowing me whole. By month 5, I'd stopped answering Jake's video calls 3 times a week, claiming connectivity issues. I couldn't look at his face. His emails went unread for days. He sent care packages, my favorite coffee, a scarf he'd bought at a bazaar, and I left them unopened, the guilt making me physically ill. His sister messaged me on Facebook, he's worried sick. What's wrong with you? I blocked her. The Davies situation spiraled when Mr. Davies suggested I take out loans in other wives' names, using the POAs they kept on file for emergencies. You're helping them too, he said. Everyone needs a safety net. I realized I was becoming bait in a larger scheme, but I was too deep to climb out. I almost did it, almost forged another signature, but stopped when I saw the name Lisa, Danny's wife. Danny came to the house after Jake's commander called him, concerned about Jake's mental state during their check-in calls. He says you're ghosting him, Danny said, standing in my doorway. He saw the envelopes piled on the counter, the past due stamps bright red. What the hell, Jenna? I slammed the door in his face. Through the window, I watched him photograph my car's license plate. The support system I'd built was crumbling. Lisa posted a cryptic status, real friends don't let friends disappear. I knew she meant me. The FRG leader emailed that I'd been removed from the deployment support roster. At the grocery store, wives turned their backs when I walked down the aisle. I was radioactive, and I couldn't explain why without confessing everything. Then Jake's mother called, hysterical. Tyler had been arrested again, this time for something worse, possession with intent. The lawyer needed another $10,000 or he'd take a plea deal that included nomming names. You have to help, she sobbed. Jake's already at risk because of, you know. She meant the child support arrangement. I hung up on her and threw my phone against the wall. Someone got hurt because of my lies. Mrs. Davies, feeling guilty or maybe just greedy, called Jake's command directly. She claimed to be a concerned citizen who'd seen suspicious financial activity. She didn't give details, but she gave them my name. The investigation started small, a clerk asking about unusual loan applications. I denied everything, my voice steady as steel, but I knew they were pulling records. The direct question came from Captain Reeves, Jake's company commander. He called me formally, voice recorded. Mrs. Anderson, did you forge your husband's signature on financial documents during his deployment? I had a choice: admit it and sink Jake's career with the scandal, or lie and hope it held. No, sir, I said, the word tasting like ash. I have proper power of attorney for all transactions. That's when I found out Jake was coming home early. Not for leave, for good. His deployment was being cut short due to family emergency reassignment. But the deployment was supposed to end in March, not May. They were sending him back because of me. The worst truth revealed itself before he even landed. I got a call from CID Criminal Investigation Command. Mr. Davies wasn't a predatory lender. He was an undercover investigator running a sting on military identity theft rings. They'd been tracking how spouses were exploiting POAs. I'd been their key witness, only I didn't know it. Every loan, every forged signature, every desperate move had been documented for a case that would put away a network of financial predators. You were never the target, Mrs. Anderson, the agent said. You were the bait that worked too well. When Jake walked into our house 48 hours later, he didn't kiss me. He set a manila envelope on the kitchen counter, the same spot where I'd once stacked overdue bills. Sign these, he said. No warmth, no anger, just exhausted flatness. Inside were divorce papers, and a subpoena, and evidence logs, and my own immunity agreement, signed when I was half-conscious from a panic attack in Mr. Davies' office 6 weeks prior. The full confession began as I scanned the pages, realizing I'd signed away my right to ever tell Jake the truth without exposing him to prosecution. The most damning detail wasn't the loans or the forged signatures. It was the wiretap transcripts. The investigators had me on recording during my monitored calls with Jake, coaching him to say things that would prove his innocence. Just tell them you're focused on the mission, I'd said. Tell them you trust me completely with finances. I'd been wearing a wire during our most intimate conversations, performing for prosecutors. Jake wasn't being investigated for fraud. He was being cleared. The papers I was served were to notify me that our marriage was being annulled as part of a fraudulent contract investigation. The Davies had discovered I'd used a false address on our marriage license 3 years ago, a technicality from when I'd been between apartments. It made our entire marriage legally voidable. They were protecting him from me. I stood there, the man I loved, looking at me like I was IED debris, dangerous, unpredictable, best handled from a distance. You saved me, they tell me, he said, voice cracking for the first time. You helped catch people stealing from families. Thank you for your service. The words were evisceration. I have to go pack my sea bag. The fallout pulverized every corner of my life. I was given 30 days to vacate family housing. The FRG circulated a statement that I'd been removed for conduct unbecoming a military spouse. My job fired me for misusing dispatch resources. I'd run background checks on the Davies early on, trying to protect myself. I moved into a motel off I-24 that rented by the week and didn't ask questions. Jake took an other-than-honorable discharge just to expedite the separation. He could have fought it, proved he knew nothing, but he wanted out. He moved back to Ohio, to his mother's house, to a son he'd never met and a brother in jail and a life I'd never be part of. The last time I checked his sister's Instagram, before she blocked me, there was a photo of him at a barbecue holding a toddler with his eyes. Someone commented, "So glad you're free of that lying bitch." It had 47 likes. I tried explaining myself once in a letter sent to his mother's address. I detailed the investigation, the immunity deal, how I'd been manipulated by professionals. His sister mailed it back, unopened, with "Return to sender deceased" written across the front. Not physically dead, just dead to them. Then the unexpected consequence hit. Because my marriage was annulled, the military retroactively revoked my designation as next of kin for my father's death benefits. The pension my mother had lived on was reduced by half. She called me, not angry, just broken. "You erased him," she whispered. "You erased us." Something cracked in me after that. I stopped telling people I'd been part of a federal investigation. I stopped saying the words, "I did it to protect him." I just stopped. The defensive armor I'd worn for 18 months fell away, and underneath was the raw truth. I'd enjoyed being the hero in my own story. I'd liked the secret power, the importance of being the woman who handled things. I tell myself I saved lives, but I destroyed the one that mattered. I saved Jake Anderson from financial predators by becoming the worst kind of predator myself, the one who uses love as a weapon. Today I work intake at the VA hospital in Clarksville. Not as a dispatcher, as a data entry clerk, the job they give people who can't be trusted with decisions. I see Jake sometimes, coming in for his disability evaluation. The first time he looked right through me like I was glass. The second time he nodded. The third time, last Tuesday, he waited until the hallway cleared and said, "I got the last of your things boxed. Want me to ship them?" I looked at him, this man I'd married, annulled, betrayed, and supposedly saved, standing there with his new wedding ring and a calm I didn't recognize. That's when I understood why I'm telling this story now. It's not for redemption. It's not for understanding. It's because yesterday I watched him walk out with his new wife, a civilian who never had to learn the difference between a ramp ceremony and a dignified transfer, and I realized some costs can't be calculated in dollars or years or even honor. You can't save someone by becoming the thing they're fighting. Some wives cheat with other men. Some cheat with other women's husbands. I cheated with justice, with investigation, with this twisted notion that I could be both victim and savior. Which is worse? The papers Jake served me weren't just divorce documents. They were a bill for services rendered, protection I never asked for, delivered by a wife who was never really his. Judge me if you want. God knows everyone else has. But at least now you know the full cost of a secret. It isn't measured in deployments or dollars. It's measured in the moment your husband looks at you and says thank you for destroying our life in order to save it. And you can't even argue, because deep down, you're not sure if he's wrong.